Hello and welcome to Harvest to You. I'm Pastor Marc, and it is a blessing to have you with us today. Listen, before we start the sermon, I want you to know about harvesttoyou.org. This is a space where you can find additional resources like sermons and devotionals, even a book I recently wrote. It's also a space where you can request prayer. I know that life can be hard, even lonely sometimes, and we would love to come alongside you with resources, equipping, and prayer for your life. Head on over to harvesttoyou.org. I want to warn you up front today, we're in Nehemiah chapter number 1, and the warning is that there's going to be a decent amount of history today. So if you love history, you're excited, and if you don't love history, that may be more of a threat than a promise to you, but we're going to get through it. And my goal, if you don't love history, is just to keep you awake for the next 15 minutes or so, and I'll consider that a success if you can hang with me. But we got to know something about the history because there's a lot of context here that if you don't understand, you just won't understand the book. So let's read the first 3 verses of Nehemiah 1, and we'll start to dissect it here a little bit. Here's what it says. It says, the words of Nehemiah, son of Hakaliah. It came to pass in the month Chislew in the 20th year, as I was in Shushan the palace, that Hanani, one of my brethren, came, he and certain men of Judah. And I asked them concerning the Jews that had escaped, which were left of the captivity, and concerning Jerusalem. And they said unto me, the remnant that are left of the captivity that are there in the province, they are in great affliction and reproach. The wall of Jerusalem also is broken down, and the gates thereof are burned with fire. Now, if you're asking yourself, who is Nehemiah and Hakaliah, his dad, what does that have to do with anything? It says he's in Shushan the palace. Where is Shushan? Does it matter that it's a palace? This says that there was a remnant in Jerusalem and some walls are broken down and gates are burned. Like, does that matter? And the answer is yes, big time, okay? You've got to understand some of these basic components to unfold the book. If you don't, it would almost be like you reading a book on racial tensions without having any knowledge of slavery or the Civil War or Jim Crow laws or Martin Luther King Jr. Like, you would have to know something about that to understand what the book was saying. In the same way, you've got to understand some of this history to understand what the book is saying. So my goal is to give you 1,500 years of history in about 15 minutes. I don't know if I can do that, but I'm going to do my best, and then we're going to apply it. Here's where I want to start. I'm going to go back to Abraham. Abraham, if you don't know him, is this guy that God chooses to start like a nation out of with his family. And you're talking about 2000 BC, about 2,000 years before Jesus. Abraham has Isaac and Jacob, and there's some lineage and some kids that unfold. And eventually, through Joseph and a series of events, they find their way into Egypt. There in Egypt, they become slaves for hundreds of years, and then eventually they're led out of Egypt, i.e. the book of Exodus. You can go read all about this. And they leave Egypt and they get commandments from God on Mount Sinai, and then they don't believe God. They're supposed to go into this promised land and claim the land and have this new home and all of this abundance, but they doubt him and they procrastinate, and God sends them wandering in the wilderness for 40 years. And then eventually Joshua takes over and leads them into the promised land, and there they claim their land. And then the book of Judges happens. And through the book of Judges, you have hundreds of years where there's this sin cycle where the people doubt God and they backslide on God. They sin. And then God rebukes them and punishes them for that. And then they repent and they feel bad about it. And then God restores them. And then they sin again. And then God punishes them. And then they repent. And then God restores them. And over and over and over you go. And that takes us about 1,000 years into Israel's history to the first moment, roughly 1000 BC now, where they elect a king. They get a guy by the name of Saul who's going to be their first potentate, their first leader. And Saul, by all accounts, is a failure. He's an extreme disappointment. He's followed by a guy named David. David is a bit better, albeit he has some moral quandaries that he finds himself in pretty often. David's a guy after God's own heart, and he writes poetry and songs, but he also fights, and he's a warrior, and he's both tender and hard, and God uses him to establish firm borders to kind of repel the enemies back. But David also has this topsy-turvy kingship where he's constantly at threat, and his son is wanting to overthrow him, and there's this whole episode where he commits adultery with this woman and murders this guy, and all of this mess. And God eventually tells David that he's going to ride off into the sunset, and David wants to do something big for God. He wants to build him a temple. And God says, no, you can get the supplies, but you can't build it. You can leave that to your son. So his son, Solomon, takes over, builds a temple, and Solomon ushers in the golden age of Israel. Under Solomon, business is booming. The economy is awesome. They are at peace. Jerusalem is established and fortified in extreme ways, and Jerusalem is the talk of the town. They are the envy of all of the land, and Solomon has this amazing reign, so much wisdom, but Solomon has a problem. Solomon loves foreign women, which is a no-no. It's not a no-no because God is against romance. It's a no-no because God was against divided hearts. And God knew that those foreign women were going to come with their own religion, and he wasn't against interracial marriage per se. He was against interreligious marriage. And sure enough, these women come in and they begin to introduce false gods and false ways of thinking. And all of a sudden, Solomon is torn and he's making poor decisions. And Solomon gets to the end of his life. The sun's about to set, and he writes this book called Ecclesiastes. And the book of Ecclesiastes basically says, my words, not his, you can have all the stuff and you can do all the stuff, but if your kids are idiots, it doesn't matter. Like if you misplay the ball and do it all and have it all, but you run from God and your family is now apart from God, like it's vanity of vanities. It doesn't matter. And sure enough, Solomon dies, and his offspring and those that were in the kingdom, they were far from God. And it doesn't take very long at all before a monumental moment happens in Israel's history. It's this moment where the nation decides that they're better off to be two nations. They're better off to split. There's not a civil war per se, but there is this moment where they decide, you know what, we're going to divide. We're going to split the 12 tribes of Israel into two kingdoms. This is roughly 925 BC. And there's the northern kingdom that is called Israel. And by the way, this is super confusing because there's a guy, like a singular person in history named Israel, and then his offspring are referred to as the children of Israel, or oftentimes the shorthand for the children of Israel, and they're just called Israel or Israelites. And then there's now this place that is the northern kingdom that is Israel, that's separate from the southern kingdom in Jerusalem. And then you fast forward to today. Now Israel is a geographical location that once again includes Jerusalem. So Israel can be super confusing depending on when you're reading your Bible. The word is applying to different things. But in this moment, Israel is the northern kingdom. They are historically bad and evil. King after king after king, ruler after ruler after ruler, they're all bad. They're all evil, all of them. Then you have the southern kingdom, which is 2 of the 12 tribes, and they go by Judah. That's also confusing because Judah was a person and then Judah was a tribe, and now Judah refers to a place that includes 2 tribes. But there's Judah, and they have Jerusalem, and they split up. What happens is Judah's a bit more flip-floppy. They waffle back and forth, good king, bad king, we're with God, we're not with God. So they last and hold on a little longer than the northern kingdom does. God begins to send prophets to both the north and the south. And he begins to tell them, you can't plug your ears at my words and my ways and keep on going. You've got to listen, you've got to obey me. You're going to pay the price if you don't. Like, I'm going to bend you over the bed and spank you. Like, this is going to happen. Once again, my word's not his, but more or less. The northern kingdom doesn't listen. And God sends a foreign pagan king and kingdom to decimate them.
It's a country by the name of Assyria, and this is roughly 200 years after they became their own entity. Assyria wipes them off the map, but the southern kingdom holds strong. Go forward about another 150 years, and you get to the point where the southern kingdom now is going to get its just desserts. And if you're like, I'm so bored with all this history, hang with me. We're almost to the part that's going to apply to Nehemiah. The southern kingdom is not listening, and there's a different world power. It's no longer Assyria, it's now Babylon. And this guy by the name of Nebuchadnezzar comes and he does what no one's been able to do for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, and that he's able to overthrow Jerusalem. If you've ever taken a trip to the Holy Land, you know that Jerusalem is up. There's valleys around it, it's up, and when you have the walls up, that it was not an impregnable fortress, but borderline close to that. And he's able to overthrow Judah and Jerusalem, and he takes captives back to Babylon. See the book of Daniel for this. Daniel is part of this, and Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego, they all come back, and now they're Babylonian captives. See the Psalms, where you'll find Psalms where we're told that I was by the rivers of Babylon, and we hung up our harps, and there we wept, because we're carried away 800 years. And now, for the first time in Israel's history, Jerusalem and Judah are now subjugated, and Babylon is ruling over them. Fast forward a few more years, and there's a new world power that comes onto the scene. It's no longer Babylon, but now it's Persia. And a man by the name of Cyrus the Great leads Persia to overthrow Babylon. They don't have to go to Jerusalem to overthrow Jerusalem because Babylon already did it, and Jerusalem was already subjects to Babylon. So the Persians inherit all of the subjects and all of the kingdom that Babylon had, including Jerusalem. We're getting real close to Nehemiah now. And there's this man by the name of Ezra. You can read about him in the book, you guessed it, called Ezra. And he gets permission from King Cyrus, the Persian king now, who is the Lord, basically, of Jerusalem. He rules over it. He gets permission to take 50,000 Jewish people back to Jerusalem in an effort to rebuild the homeland, an effort to rebuild the walls and to restore it and to get some sort of form or glory and to get it on its own feet. And if you read the book of Ezra, you find out that their attempts to do this are stymied. The neighbors are not happy about this. They do not want Jerusalem to be strong. They come against them, and they get their building permits revoked, basically, and they're no longer able to do this. And it's at this moment that Nehemiah is going to receive a report on how that is going in Jerusalem. How is Ezra doing? What is happening? What's going on with the walls and with the city? And this report comes back from Nehemiah's brother and some other dudes that are Jewish guys, and they tell him, it ain't good. It's not good at all. There's people that are there, but like everything's still torn down. Nothing's rebuilt. The job has not been done. They're wide open to attacks. Like, it's not pretty. In verse number 4 of Nehemiah 1 tells us that Nehemiah is very grieved by this. He weeps. He cries, he mourns. Now let's pause for a moment. Layered into all of Israel's history here are a lot of lessons to be learned, but I want to at least draw your attention to one. There is this theme, whether you're reading about Abraham and Isaac in Genesis, or whether you're reading about the Exodus and you're reading Deuteronomy and you're seeing the children of Israel wandering in the wilderness, or you're reading the book of Judges, or you're reading Daniel, or you're reading the prophets, there is this theme all throughout Israel's history, and this is the theme. When you ignore God's words and God's ways, you may laugh in the evening, but you're going to cry in the morning. You find this lesson layered into their history, and in turn our history, that is still a very valid lesson, that when you ignore God and you decide to stop your ears and to basically treat God's commands as optional and decide if it suits your fancy or not and do what you want instead of what God clearly tells you to do or not do, when you do that, you may laugh in the evening. Like, sin does a good job of helping you enjoy the evening. Sin knows how to dim the lights and turn up the music and to have a great party. But come morning when the sun comes up and there's a huge mess and sin went out the back door and now you have clarity and regret, you're going to cry in the morning. And Israel learns this lesson time and time and time again. And Nehemiah is this man who's kind of at the tail end of these lessons, who can now look back with hundreds of years of perspective and can see that God wasn't playing. When God said, go your own way, there's a way that seems right unto a man, but the end thereof are the ways of death. He wasn't messing. When God said, the soul that sinneth, it shall surely die, that wasn't a joke. When God says the wages of sin are death, and we're not just talking about physical death, we're talking about spiritual death. We're talking about death of your joy, death of your peace, death of your relationship that you hold so dear, death of your financial portfolio, whatever it is. When you mess around and you tinker and you toy with sin and you have a good time for a little bit, and there is pleasure to be had in sin for a season, don't mark my words, mark God's words. You can laugh at night, but you're going to cry in the morning. There is this note of clarity that resounds through the history of Israel that is basically a note that you are not the exception to the rule. All of us think that we are the person who has the capability to walk the moral high wire. You're not that person. You may for a little bit. You may get away with it this week, this month, maybe even this year. But eventually, that's going to come home to roost. Eventually, there is a price that you are going to pay. There is a wage for sin, and it's a wage that you don't like. And there is, just looking at the history and backdrop of Nehemiah, there's this note for God's people to remember: don't ignore God's words and God's ways. Don't play fast and loose in your relationships like Solomon did. Don't be a deceptive manipulator like Jacob was. Don't throw God's word out the window and decide that you're going to live by the cultural narrative that is whatever it is today, or that you're going to live by your own heart and whatever suits your fancy, and pretend like the book of Judges doesn't have a bearing on your life. It has a bearing on your life. You may not be threatened with King Nebuchadnezzar or an Assyrian army coming to overthrow your home, but I am telling you right now, there is an end, and the end thereof are the ways of death, and it will end ruinously for you if you disregard God's word, especially if you are his child. He will not. If you're his child, he doesn't leave you by yourself to go do whatever you want and just say, you know what? Whatever, play stupid games, win stupid prizes. No. God will discipline you. He will chastise you. He will bend you over the bed and spank you, not because he wants to pay you back, but because he wants to win you back and bring you back and put you back on track. And Israel has to learn this lesson, that it's not okay with God if they just thumb their nose at him and do whatever they want. It's not okay. And Nehemiah steps into the story after generational sin and a lot of wrong. And he has this heart to somehow be an agent of change, to somehow do something. He's grieved by the report that Jerusalem is still in shambles. He's in Shushan the palace because Shushan is a Persian palace. There was both a summer and a winter palace, Shushan being the winter palace, and he is in the palace. You say, well, why is this guy in the palace? It says he was in the palace for 20 years. He's been in the palace for 20 years. What's he doing? Well, go to the end of the chapter. Very last phrase at the end of the chapter, the end of verse number 11, it tells us, I was the king's cupbearer. Now, if you don't know what a cupbearer is, that's the person who has to taste the food before the king eats it to make sure that it's not poison. It's the perfect job for an adrenaline junkie who also loves food. Because you get to eat some really good stuff, you just never know if that bite is your last bite. You know what I'm saying? Like, we all know what it's like to eat something and be like, oh, I don't think it's going to sit well with me. Nehemiah had to take a spoonful of stuff and be like, this could be the end. You know, that had to have been an adrenaline rush every time. He's the king's cupbearer. He's in the palace. He's there serving the king. Now, all of this is going to have an extreme bearing. Once we get into chapter 2 and 3, you're going to see how all this plays a part, serving there in the Persian palace. But here's Nehemiah. Now, let me pause for a moment and let me lay some modern history over top of Nehemiah. And you're going to see, hopefully, why we're studying this book and why it could be so good for our church right now. When I say modern history, really, I mean our church's history. You know, we are in a really unique moment as a church right now. You might have guessed that, whether you're brand new or whether you've been around a while. You may pull up on the campus and immediately see, like, hey, there's some things that are different happening here. On one hand, we're a very established church. A handful of you remember the days when we were not an established church, when we had no assets, we had no property, the church was in a storefront, there were just a handful of people. Like, you remember those days. There wasn't a staff, it was just like us four no more sort of thing. You know, we're more than 4 decades in, and that's changed. And to God be the glory for that. I'm glad that that's changed. It's been awesome for us to come to this campus. I wasn't here during those days, but many of you were, and we're sitting right now in this room because of your faith and your sacrifice. And even though that's been more than 15 years ago now, I still think it's deeply important for us as a church family to constantly tip our hats to you and say thank you for your faith and your sacrifice to get us to these days, because that was monumental and extravagant and amazing. So we have now, as a church, decades of history, and we're established to some degree, right? We didn't start the school yesterday. There was a day where we started the school yesterday, and there were 13 students, and it was brand new, and you're trying to figure it out. But, times change. And you fast forward a couple decades, and all of a sudden there's 300-something kids, and there's a campus and a footprint, and there's things happening. And I love that. I love the sense of you can settle in. The church has a culture, an identity, a doctrinal statement that's not changing. All those things are perfect. They're great. But on the other hand, we're living in moments right now where we're anything but rooted, it feels like. It feels like something is always changing. I mean, just the facility footprint alone, right? You pull up on a campus, it's what's new this week, right? Is there siding? Is there a cross-up? Are there 10-foot mounds of snow out there? The lobby that used to be a lobby, what happened to that? There's all this stuff that's changing all of the time. And when you come into these moments of we're super established, but also there's a ton that's happening that's fresh, it starts to create mentalities, mindsets, heartbeats in people that as a pastor, you just begin to notice. You begin to notice how people are thinking and talking and the conversations, the emails that they have. And I want to lay out for you a few of the personality types maybe, or heartbeats that I get to hear from pretty often in this season of ministry for us over the last 12 or 18 months. And I promise you, it'll make sense with Nehemiah in just a minute. I've given each of these kind of playful avatars to see if you can find yourself in these, but there's 5 of them. I get to talk to relaxed Rons every once in a while. These are the people who are basically, if it's not broken, don't fix it. These are some of you who would say listen, we did it. We crossed the Jordan River that was the Allegheny, and we got over here out of New Kensington, and here, I said out of New Kensington like that was a bad thing. I'm not saying it was a bad thing, but we're grateful to be here. Can I just put it that way? And here we are. It's not even new anymore, right? We have chairs, we have a parking lot. It's not gravel anymore. The school is established. I remember when Pastor Skelly announced his resignation, and I was scared. I was fearful. That was a very tender time. I didn't know what was going to happen, but we're past that now. Things are settled. Things are good. We're good. Keep it the same. Don't change anything. If it's not broke, don't fix it. Stop messing with stuff. On the other hand, you have the agitated atoms. I come across these less now than I did years ago, but this is certainly still present. People who more or less say, I don't know what I imagined church life to look like in 2026, but I'm just not sure I pictured this. It looks different than I would have thought or would have hoped. And there's things that I don't know, like my spidey senses tell me something's not off. It doesn't sit well with me. And that can take all kinds of shapes and sizes in the emails and the conversations I have from, I don't like, the music used to be a little bit quieter. No one raised their hand. There were no drums. I liked it better that way. Or the lobby used to be pretty. I liked it better that way. Or, Pastor Skelly, he was better than you. I liked it better that way. Or whatever it may be. And there's something that I don't know. I'm just in my spirit. I'm pent up. I don't feel good about something. Something's wrong, We have a lot going on. There's a lot of money happening, and we should talk more about money. Or there's a lot going on. There's lots of money. Stop talking about money. Don't mention it one more time. And I'm pent up. I've had more than a few conversations that I got done with the conversation. I just thought, this is a raging sea that I'm talking to, this foaming and waves crashing, and I don't even know where we're going. I don't even know what you're agitated about. I just know you're agitated about something. And that can happen, in seasons of change. They say that only wet babies like change, and even they cry about it. I'm not sure if that's true, but I get it. I get it. On the other hand, you have the curious Chris's of the world who are on the outside looking in and are saying I don't know what's happening at this place, but I want to come check it out. I see cars going up a drive and buses going up a drive. I see signs out on the highway, and I drive by at night and there's lights up there. Is that a car dealership? What is that place up there? I want to go check that out. And they're curious and they come, and there's you guys, right? And you guys, kudos to you. You're friendly and you're warm, but not in a weird, overly bearing, constantly in your business way. You know what I'm talking about? If you've ever been to a small church where, you were the first visitor they've had in 6 months, you know what I'm talking about. Because everyone's just someone's new, Or if you've been to an older church and the only young person, it's a hard feeling to get over. But people are curious, and they come, and they come to Intro to Harvest, and they check it out, and I love that. On the other hand, you have the visionary people, the visionary Vanessas. These are the people that are yesterday's history. Thank you. I salute you for getting us to this moment. But yesterday's dead. Tomorrow. What are we going to do next? I know that the building's not done yet, but let's think about the next building. Let's figure this out, I've had more than one of you actually tell me we need to build a parking garage. We should build a concrete parking garage. Where do you want to put we do need parking, but where do you want to put the parking garage? That land across the 28, have you seen it? Look right across the 28, the excavated land. We should just buy that. We could just get a ski lift, right? And it could just tote us back and forth from the parking garage over to here. And if the 28 won't let us go over it, just buy the 28, Put a toll booth on there, charge people, fund the vision. We can do it. And I love you. I love you. You're the Walt Disneys of the world who are just let's do something else. Then there's the planners, the planner Pauls. They're listen, I'm not against the vision. I'm not against going forward, but can we time out for just a minute? Can we figure this out first? Can we, I know we want to start the new ministry, but these other two ministries aren't operating as smoothly or efficiently as they used to be. And you got to stop. We got to calculate. And you put a visionary Vanessa and a planner Paul together, that could be World War III. It's an interesting dynamic. Because the visionary looks at the planner and is get with the program, right? And the planner looks at the visionary and is take a beat, buddy. The planner oftentimes looks at the visionary and they see them as ready, fire, aim, right? They got trigger finger. They're just ready to go. A visionary looks at a planner and says, you're ready, aim, keep aiming, take a nap, go to a hunter safety course, start aiming again, fire. Dude, we should have pulled that trigger 6 years ago. And you get those people together, and what can happen is you start to have a lot of dynamics. You start to have family Christmas, really. You start to have all these personality types that come together, and it can be beautiful and unique and awesome, but it can also be really disruptive and really chaotic, and it can fill your pastoral email inbox with some really funny, strange, awesome, comical emails. And the reason that this is important is because the book of Nehemiah, perhaps better than any other book in all of the Bible, talks to all of these groups in concrete ways. As we move through this book, you're going to find the agitators, you're going to find the planners, you're going to find the visionary, you're going to find the people who are just relaxed and need someone to kick them in the seat of their pants and get them going. Like, you're going to find all these people. And what the book of Nehemiah in many ways is meant to do is shake the relaxed, focus the agitated, inform the curious, direct the visionaries, and organize the planners. Now, I'm going to say that again because I think it bears repeating. Nehemiah in many ways is meant to shake the relaxed and to say, like, hey, wake up. God still wants to do stuff. He's not done. God's not in the business of just working yesterday. Like, he still wants to do things. It focuses the agitators and says, hey, I know that those things may be a thorn in your side, but focus on the big picture. Focus on what's really important. It takes those that are curious and it gives them some information and invites them to be a part. It's beautiful. It takes those that are visionaries and it gives them some direction and some guidance and doesn't just turn them loose. It takes those that want to plan and organize and it gives them some sort of blueprint for how to do that, but how to do that efficiently so you can keep moving. That's important for us in this season. I don't know if you're anything like me, but as I look at those types of people and those categories, I must admit that I struggle to place myself squarely on one team. I'm not relaxed Ron. That's not my DNA. It's just not who I am. But the others, I think I'm like multiple of them like every day. I think I'm an agitated visionary today. I think that next week we should have hats and t-shirts for these categories and you can just identify yourself. It would be really helpful to me pastorally if we can just give you colors and names and you can just come in and you can own your spot and then we'll be able to identify each other and find our birds of a feather. But this is a really, really helpful book, I think, for the season of ministry and life for our faith family to dive into and to try to understand how can God take a whole bunch of mishmash, hodgepodge people and put them together and push them in the right direction and see something beautiful happen? Because that's what happens in this book. And it's something that people had tried to do for years, for decades, for centuries, and they couldn't get it done. But Nehemiah has this knack and gifting of God to be able to get it done. Now, back to Nehemiah. You may be wondering, okay, we started the book of Nehemiah. Who is this guy? Oh, Hakaliah is his daddy, and he has a brother who gave him a bad report, and he's a cupbearer. Anything else we should know? I think there's one important thing you should know. We'll press into this a little more next week, but I would be remiss if I didn't at least let you know a little bit about this man spiritually. Who is Nehemiah? Well, he's a Jewish guy. Presumably, his ancestors were carried away into captivity long before he was. But he's been working for a Persian dignitary for 20 years now, being his cupbearer. But he has a heart for his homeland. He has a heart for God. And you find in the middle of Nehemiah 1 this prayer. I'm not going to dissect the prayer. We'll do that next week. But this prayer where he tells you a little bit about who he is. Verse number 6, he tells you in no uncertain terms that he's a sinner. Don't get the impression that Nehemiah is some super saint. He's a sinner. Here's what he says in verse number 6. Let thine ear now be attentive, God, thine eyes open, that thou mayest hear the prayer of thy servant, which I pray before thee now day and night. For the children of Israel, thy servants, and confess the sins of the children of Israel, which we have sinned against thee. You say, okay, great. You're saying like the nation has sinned. Phenomenal. Well, it's more than just the nation. Listen to the last words. Both I and my father's house, we've sinned. Here's a man who's willing to own his sin. He's not just going to blanket statement, you know what, the nation is against you, God, shame on us. It's not just, oh, my daddy, he did wrong. He ate sour grapes, so now my teeth are on edge. The nation's wrong. In my household, we've been wrong. And I've been wrong. I've sinned. He's not a perfect guy. You say, what exactly was his sin? I don't know. I don't know what moral quandaries he found himself in. But he's willing to say, I've sinned. But he's not just a sinner. Nehemiah is a redeemed sinner. If you look at verse number 10, now these are thy servants and thy people, which thou hast redeemed by thy great power and by thy strong hand. Who are the people that have been redeemed? All these sinners that he talked about. God, we are wrong. I'm telling you we're wrong. I'm telling you that we're sinners. I know this. I own this. But at the same time, I acknowledge who you are. I know who I am, but I know who you are. You're the God who redeems, and you've redeemed us. And you've redeemed us not because of what we did, not because of what we said, not because we're awesome. You redeemed us because of your strong hand and your great power. So God, thank you. Nehemiah is a redeemed sinner. If this isn't a prototype of the gospel, I don't know what is, where a man can say, I've done wrong, but God, I can rely on you and your power, and you can redeem me. You can save me. You can save us. Like we rely on you. He's a redeemed sinner who ends up taking God very seriously. You read this prayer this week on your own time. We'll cover it next week. But what you find is that Nehemiah knows who God is. He knows what his commands are, and he's willing to take him at his word. And there's a vital lesson for us to end today on. God is in the business of using redeemed sinners who take him seriously. This is a beautiful note. On one hand, you have the history of Israel that teaches you, like, don't play with God. Like, he's not your plaything. Do not trifle with him. You can go against him, and you may laugh in the evening, but you're going to weep in the morning. On the other hand, you have this important note that those same sinners who do laugh in the evening, God redeems them, God saves them, and when they take him seriously, he uses them, he restores them, he helps them, and there is both a warning to those that are wandering far from God, but also this note of encouragement to say, come back and come home, and I will take you, I will clean you, I will use you, I will help you, I'll funnel my spirit into and through you. Like, I want to do something with you. Nehemiah is not a book that's about this special category of like elite super soldier Christians that God wants to deploy. Nehemiah is a book that tells us that God can use anybody and everybody. If you're willing to admit your sin and rely on his power and his grace and take him seriously at his word, then he will do something through you individually, through your family, I dare say through a church. When there's a group of people, like a collective, who say, we're sinners, we know it, we're not better than anybody else. But God has redeemed us by his grace. It's his strong hand that saved us. And we want to take him seriously. Watch out for that group in a good way. God delights in using and doing things that are almost unimaginable when there's a collective that will say, we're going to take you at your word. And my encouragement to us is multifaceted for sure. On one hand, it is a wake up and smell the coffee. If you're just walking away from God and you think that you're not going to pay the price for that. Like, own it, repent of it, come back to him. On the other hand, it's the encouragement to know that it's not just like, welcome back. Now I'm going to set you over to the side with the broken toys that I don't really want to mess with anymore. That's not how he works. You take him seriously, and he'll work through you, through us. He delights in doing that, and may we delight in him because of it.
I pray that today's message challenged and encouraged you in your walk with Christ. And if this sermon was a blessing to you, know that it was made available because of our financial partners. I want to take a moment and invite you to be a part of that tribe. I know not everyone's in a position to give, and if that's you, then please just let this broadcast be a blessing. There are no strings attached. But if God's blessed you with the ability to give, I would love for you to link arms with us and support what God is doing here. As a small way of saying thank you for your generosity, I'd love to send you a copy of my new book, The Prayer Jesus Gave. This is a guided tour through the model prayer, the Our Father, as some call it. And if you've ever felt like your prayer life could use an upgrade, I know it will be a help. You can give and receive your copy at harvesttoyou.org/give, or by mailing a donation to the address on your screen. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next Sunday.